everyone, for today's video I will be unboxing and reviewing the NYXI Master P1 Controller, which is compatible with multiple devices such as iOS, Android mobile devices, the Nintendo Switch, PC, and Android TVs. On top of that, this controller is wireless and utilizes Bluetooth or 2.4G connectivity, but you can also use the cable provided to have a wired controller. Now, before I get to unboxing this controller, I just want to thank NYXI for sending this controller out for me to review, and even though this controller was sent out to me, my review will be 100% unbiased, as I personally hate promoting terrible products. So if I find any issues with this controller, I will let you know. And with that out the way, let's get to unboxing this Master P1 controller. First thing first, when it comes to the packaging, it's a pretty standard packaging job by NYXI nowadays. And yes, by the way, this is a sleeve. There's no information on the sides, and the main information's on the back. It gives you a basic rundown to all the key features, but I will cover all of these later on in the video, as well as the compatibility of this controller. But let's go ahead and take out this controller. Like I said, that's just a sleeve, which now leaves us with this box, which you can just slide up. And here is the controller, and the accessories are just under this bottom flap. In the box, you get an adapter, the charging cable, which is a USB-A to a USB-C. And for once, NYXI is giving us braided charging cables. And even though I said charging cable, this is the cable that you have to use in order for the controller to be a wired controller. So this is definitely going to have a lot of durability, and I do appreciate them upgrading their charging cables to this design. And it definitely is a very long cable. And of course, we get an instruction manual, and the controller does come in plastic wrap. However, the thumbsticks are protected by these foam rings, which I truly do appreciate, since these basically prevent the thumbsticks from moving around a whole lot during shipping. Now, when it comes to the packaging, I'm gonna give it a solid 9 out of 10. The controller is protected for the most part. For me personally, I wish the controller was more secured in the box, as there wasn't anything on the sides to prevent it from moving around during shipping. However, the thumbsticks are protected, and it isn't a plastic wrap, so you shouldn't get any scratches. Now, overall first impressions, this is giving me like an Xbox One controller feel. One thing I have to point out, there is textured grips on these, which is really nice. The white bit right here is your LED lighting. You have the Xbox layouts, the thumbsticks. They don't feel stiff. They feel really nice. And also the nice thing about these thumbsticks, they are Hall effect, which means none of the internal parts are physically touching. They're utilizing sensors and magnets, so you'll never get stick drift. Also, these thumbsticks do have a textured ring going around it and slightly concave, but also domed. So essentially, the outer bit is concave, but the exact middle of the thumbstick has a dome feel to it. For the D-pad, it actually feels like, is this tactile? And I guess so, since it's a microswitch D-pad. But if you enjoy that mouse click feel, this is something you might enjoy. Hopefully you can hear it in the microphone. But then for the X, Y, A, B buttons, they're just standard buttons. They don't have the mouse click, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but NYXI does say that these buttons are durable. One thing I am now noticing on this controller, you do have a mute button and a plus minus button on the bottom. Looking at the website, these are just volume controls, which is very interesting, especially since I don't see a headphone jack anywhere. Then you have your home button, your settings button, your back button, and your start button. Then obviously you have your charging port at the very top with this very interesting cutout here. The bumpers are just standard bumpers. They're not mouse click. And then when you check out the back, you do have 2 back buttons, which you can lock. So if you don't want back buttons and don't have to worry about accidentally clicking your back buttons, just flip on these switches and you'll be perfectly fine. And to be honest, I'm a huge fan of the placement of the back buttons. My middle fingers rest perfectly on top of the button. It's not obstructed and it doesn't feel awkward. Then right here in the middle, this is how you switch the controller's compatibility with different devices. So if you move the switch to the far left, that's Bluetooth. The middle, that's for the Nintendo Switch. To the far right, that's for this adapter right here. Then these switches right here is how you change your triggers. If you have it on the very bottom, you have Hall effect triggers. So just like the thumbsticks, none of the internal parts will be touching. It will be utilizing sensors and magnets for your trigger movements. But if you have it all the way up to the top, the triggers become mouse click ones. Then to turn on this controller, just press the home button, and to turn it off, just press and hold down the home button until the LED ring around the home button turns off, which means the controller is off. But besides that, this controller feels like a really nice controller, and honestly, I cannot wait to use this on my devices. So let's get straight to it. But to start things off, I'm going to connect the controller to my phone. Well, first thing first, before you connect the controller to your phone, make sure it is set to the Bluetooth setting. Then go to your settings on your phone, go to Bluetooth Bluetooth, then press and hold down the home button on the controller until it turns on and starts flashing. And once you see Xbox wireless controller, just click on it. And when it connects, you'll get an orange LED light around the home button. And after using this controller for 5 hours on Call of Duty Warzone Mobile, I can confidently say it was a great experience. I didn't get any noticeable input delay, but obviously since it's a Bluetooth controller, there will be some latency. But for the most part, this is definitely a must buy for mobile gamers. And I definitely do love the standard Xbox button layouts, as I do mainly play Xbox. So it's just a natural transition from Xbox to my iPhone with this controller. Now, before I connect this controller to the Switch, make sure that you have it set to the Nintendo Switch setting. Then on your Nintendo Switch, just go down and select controllers, then select change grip/order, then press and hold down the home button until the lights are flashing. And just like that, we are paired. And when it is connected, the LED ring around the home button will be white. And before you make the same mistake as me, you have to make a mental note that the controller is now in switch mode, because if you press A on that menu, it's going to reset everything and you have to repair it. But luckily, the pairing process for this controller is very simple. And after using this controller for a stressful 6 hours of shiny hunting Pokemon in the Halloween mass outbreak event and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I can confidently say this controller is going to be my new daily controller. My only complaint is that I wish there was an option to swap the XYAB buttons to have an Xbox layout than a Switch layout, but obviously when the controller is set to Switch mode, it will default to the Switch layout. But the easiest way to get around this is to go into your system settings and go down to controllers and sensors, then go over and select change button mapping. Then on the Pro controller, head over and select change, then just change the buttons to your liking. But I did have fun playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet with the Master P1 controller. It was a very pleasant experience. The only thing frustrating during that experience was just trying to find shiny Pokemon. But overall, I didn't really notice any input delay. And if you're just curious, the mute button in the middle is the screenshot button, the back button is the minus button, and the start button is the plus button. Now when it comes to connecting this controller wirelessly to the PC, you have two options. Option 1, you can set the controller to the Bluetooth setting. Then on your PC, go into your Bluetooth settings, then click on add device, then click on Bluetooth, then press and hold down the home button on the controller until you see flashing lights. And once you see Xbox wireless controller, click on it, and when it is connected, the LED ring around the home button will be orange. And after using this controller in the Bluetooth setting on my PC while playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6, I have to admit, it was a pretty good experience. I didn't get any noticeable input delay, but once again, since it is a Bluetooth controller, you can expect some latency. Besides that, I had a fun time using this controller. Everything felt responsive, and for it being the first time I played Black Ops 6 on my PC and my first time using this controller on my PC, I actually wasn't doing too bad. Then for the second option, you can set the controller to the adapter setting, then plug in the 2.4G adapter provided into an open USB-A slot on your PC, and when you plug it in, the LED light on the adapter will flash red. Then just press and hold down the home button on the controller until you see flashing lights, and once those lights turn to a solid blue, you are connected. Now if you weren't aware, with this adapter, the controller will utilize a 2.4G wireless connection, and when compared to Bluetooth, the latency will be minimal, and it feels like almost playing with a wired controller. And after playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6 with this connection, I can confidently say this is a great wireless controller option for PC gamers. I mean, the Bluetooth connection on his controller is pretty good. It's just for a competitive game like Call of Duty Black Ops 6, you need to have minimal latency so your actions can be precise. So with that being said, I didn't really notice any input delay with this controller when set to the adapter setting. But you can also use the charging cable provided to turn this controller into a wired controller. So since we're on the topic of PC usage of this controller, all you have to do is plug in the USB-C end of the cable into the charging port of the controller, and then plug in the USB-A end of the cable into an open USB-A slot on your PC, and you do not have to worry about setting the controller to a specific setting on the back, as it's going to work regardless. And I have to say, playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6 with the wired connection was hands down my favorite, as there was literally zero input delay, plus you don't have to worry about the battery life of the controller. Also, when you have this controller connected to a PC, you can change the controller from being an X input device device into a D input device by pressing and holding down the A, B, and home buttons at the same time until the controller vibrates and the LED ring around the home button will turn green. Now, I only see this being beneficial if you're playing an older game that only supports D input devices. Besides that, just leave the controller in the default setting, as most games nowadays mainly support X input devices. On top of that, you can also use this controller as a wire controller with your Nintendo Switch. Obviously, you need to have the dock in order for this to work. But before you plug in the controller, please go into your system settings, then go down to controllers and sensors, then go over to the Pro Controller wire communication setting and make sure that is turned on, as the controller will not be functional if that setting is off. But once you have that setting on, make sure you have the controller set to the Nintendo Switch setting, then plug in the controller. And once again, I personally enjoy the wire connection, especially when I'm shiny hunting in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, so I don't have to worry about the battery life of the controller. But since we're on this topic, this controller has a 6 to 8 hour battery life, depending on what settings you have on, and only takes 2.5 hours to charge. And those numbers are accurate, as I did have to charge this controller twice so far. And when the battery is low, the LED ring around the home button will flash red, and when you plug it in to charge, a red light will appear above the mute button, and once that light turns off, that means the controller is fully charged. And lastly, you can use this controller with Android TVs, so make sure you have the controller set to the Bluetooth setting, then go into your add device settings of your TV so you can start a Bluetooth search. Then on the controller, just press and hold down the home button until you see the flashing lights, and once you see Xbox wireless controller, just click on it and pair it. And once the controller is connected, the LED ring around the home button will be orange, and you can actually just use the controller as if it was the TV remote, which is something I personally do enjoy. And as you can see, the controller works perfectly fine. I honestly didn't notice any input delay. However, since it is a Bluetooth controller, you can expect some latency. And also, a nice little thing about this controller, if you press the home button, it will take you to the TV's home page, which I find as a nice feature. But just for fun, I tried using this controller on a Samsung TV so I could play Call of Duty Black Ops 6 with cloud gaming, and I was able to connect the controller. However, the buttons on the controller had incorrect inputs. For example, the back and start buttons were being read as if they're my left and right bumpers. And the reason why that happens is because Android and Samsung TVs use different operating systems, and not all Android TV devices are compatible with Samsung TVs. So if you want to use this controller with your TV, make sure it's an Android TV so you won't have any issues. Now for the remaining key features, this controller has a wireless range of 10 meters, or in other words, about 33 feet. But let's be serious, you shouldn't be playing that far away from your console. But it is nice to know that this device does have some range. On top of that, this controller also has gyroscope motion controls. This is mainly ideal for racing games. Then in order to program the back buttons, it is a very simple process of just pressing and holding down the settings button and the back button you want to program at the same time until you feel the controller vibrates and the LED ring around the home button will begin to flash. Then just press the button you want the back button to be, then press the back button you are programming to finish the programming process. And as you can see, I programmed the back buttons to be my jump button and my reload button in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Then if you repeat those same steps, you can program the back buttons to perform a macro function. So I'm going to program the right back button to perform a jump, melee, swap weapons, and then shoot. This is mainly ideal for fighting games, and NYXI states that you can program each back button to perform at most a 21 button macro, but from my own testing, you can only get up to a 16 button macro, as the programming process automatically turns off once you press a 17th button, but still, this is very impressive. Also, this controller does have a turbo mode, which is essentially an auto clicker, so yes, it will give you an unfair advantage, and personally, I will not be using this in multiplayer games. But let's just say you're playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and you want to make a semi-auto weapon to become a full auto weapon without using your trigger finger. Just press and hold down the settings button, then press the button you want to be auto clicked. So in this case, that will be the right trigger, and now what was once a semi-auto weapon is now a full auto weapon. Then if you repeat those steps, once you press the button, you don't have to do anything. It's going to do all the work for you. And if you want to turn it off, just repeat the steps once more. And you can also adjust the speed of the turbo mode by pressing and holding down the settings button, then move the right joystick up to increase the speed, or move the right joystick down to decrease the speed. And there are 3 speeds to choose from, those being high, medium, and low. As you can see in the gameplay, it is somewhat noticeable, but personally, if I'm going to use the turbo mode, I would just stick with the default setting. Now, if you recall earlier in the video, I showed you how the controller has a mute button and volume buttons. Well, these volume controls only work if you are connected to a PC with the adapter setting or using the cable provided. And I have to admit, it's quite a convenient feature. On top of that, you can adjust the vibration of this controller by pressing and holding down the settings button and then press up on the D-pad to increase the vibration, or press down on the D-pad to decrease the vibration. And there are 4 levels to choose from, and for me personally, I enjoy the vibration off, especially since the vibration on this controller, when set to its max, is pretty strong. And lastly, you can customize the RGB lighting of the controller. By default, it will have a 7-color gradual changing light, but you can change the RGB lighting to just one of the 7 colors by pressing and holding down the settings button and then move the left joystick to the left. From here, you can just cycle through the colors, and each color does have a breathing light effect, and you have 7 colors to choose from, which are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. But if you want to go back to the 7-color gradually changing light, just press and hold down the settings button, then move the left joystick to the right. And if you want to adjust the brightness of the RGB lighting, just press and hold down the settings button and then move the left joystick up to increase the brightness and move the left joystick down to decrease the brightness. And there are only 3 settings to choose from. And if you want to turn off the RGB lighting completely, just press and hold down the settings button and the left joystick at the same time until the RGB lights turn off. And to turn them back on, just repeat the steps. Now, with all the key features out the way, you are probably wondering how much this controller costs. Well, the price tag of this controller is $49.99 USD. And honestly, for that price, this controller is a steal, especially when you compare it to the official Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which has a price tag of around $70 USD. And the only thing the Pro controller has over the Master P1 controller is NFC functionality. Besides that, the Master P1 controller is the better option. And if you want to buy the Master P1 controller, you can click the top link in my description, and when you're ready to check out, use code BC5 to save 10% off your order. But if you prefer Amazon, I will also have an affiliated link in the description as well. In conclusion, with no personal biases, I'm giving this controller a 10 out of 10, as you will be getting a high quality controller that has multiple features and is customizable for a great price. But based on my personal preferences, I'm going to give this controller a 9.5 out of 10. The only things I would like to improve on this controller are the thumbsticks. Specifically, I would prefer fully concave thumbsticks like the NYXI Wizard on this controller, but luckily, PlayStation control freaks do fit on these thumbsticks, so I can get my concave fill. And I would also like the thumbsticks to have a metal ring around the thumbstick's neck, as I am a bit rough with thumbsticks. However, the thumbstick cutouts on the controller do have a smooth ring around it, so at least the thumbstick neck has some protection. And the last thing is that I wish all the buttons on this controller were tactile, just like the D-pad and triggers. And speaking of the triggers, I honestly prefer the Hall effect triggers more than the mouse click triggers, as I was more consistent with the Hall effect setting in Call of Duty Black Ops 6, as when I was using the mouse click triggers, I would get some hiccups while firing, but that was mainly because I didn't let the trigger finish the complete motion. So once you get the timing down right, the mouse click triggers are pretty good, but still, I just wish all the buttons on this controller had the mouse click fill. And obviously, if NYXI were to incorporate all my personal preferences, the price on this controller would go up. So overall, this is a great controller, and with the holiday season around the corner, this would be a perfect gift for family members, friends, or even your significant other if they play on a Nintendo Switch, PC, iOS or Android mobile devices, or even the Android TV. Besides that, hopefully this video was helpful. Make sure to drop a like, consider subscribing if you're new, and if you do, make sure to turn on those post notifications, and hopefully I will catch you all in the next video. Have a good one, and once again, thank you NYXI for sending me out this controller to review.